Mr. Danny Denhard, a very, very warm welcome to 10Q interview. You are the first guest so far to have a second appearance, and I could think of no one better to be the first person to do that. So, congrats.
Thank you. I feel very honoured.
So, as you know, this podcast is about content creators and the journey they've gone on, their learnings, and hopefully, we can inspire and educate the next band of content creators to come through. I'm going to talk to you today mainly about newsletters. As I've mentioned to you before, one of my favorite newsletters of the week um, is, I guess, the aptly named must read newsletter that you put out on a Friday morning. And I'm not just saying this because you're on here. I have said this to you before prior to recording that it is one of the very few that gets read pretty quickly after arrival. So let's talk about newsletters. Why have you gone down this route? How did you get started?
Well, thanks very much for the kind compliment. Just to share some insights, Chris shared something years ago on Twitter about must reads, and it's in my hype file. So I'll dive into a hype file and why anyone should keep one as a creator. But
Do you know what? It's
um,
weird you say that. That's the third time in the last couple of weeks I've heard people talk about hype files.
hype files and swipe files very quickly. Hype file is where someone hypes you up or gives you a compliment or gives you like a prop or gives you a shout out. Save them in notes or docs or whatever works for you. And when you've had like a low moment, they're brilliant pick me ups. And a swipe file
Yeah.
is when someone else does something brilliant. It's called swipe because you copy it basically, and your swipe file will help
Inspired
you.
by it,
And
Danny, not copied.
yeah, well, keep, kill, cure, copy, cure, etc. Right. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So you're actually one of the highest up on the hype file. So thank you very much.
Oh.
To answer your question, um, to so the audience don't feel like it's just mates chatting. Um, I wanted to be a journalist, and I love the art of creating and curating. So I love the idea of creating stuff, but I also am aware there's people that can write things much better than I can, or produce content, whether that's video, audio, etc., much better than I can. But
Yeah.
I can curate that as opposed to just having to create it. So I had experience within a local newspaper and a newsroom, and the local paper put me off, and the large newsroom also didn't have great ripples on me. So I decided years ago that when I used to blog a lot, because that's what you used to do, and I still blog fairly regularly, I thought it would be great just to share the content. So um, must read sort of came out of an internal newsletter I used to do. So wherever I work, I created an internal newsletter, basically an email that I'd send around to either the agency that I worked in or a company that I worked in to share knowledge.
Yeah.
So I'm all self-taught. So to give people some context, because I was always self-taught, I didn't go to university, etc. I For me to know that I understand a subject, I have to teach people. So very
Yeah.
often it's either in an email, a Slack, a WhatsApp, whatever else. So I used to put together an email and share it out once a week, and it was sharing knowledge or insights into the business other people didn't know. And some people can do it with share a voice. I was doing it what other people said until became comfortable in sharing stuff that I knew or insights that I found. So oddly enough, I used to track all the clicks because of my growth marketing and product background with my own custom URL shortener built on Bitly when it was popular. And it got shared within the leadership team of one of the companies I worked at. And
Okay.
someone basically said to me, I've got it in the hype file, said that they spent their Saturday mornings with a coffee basically reading it. And the aha moment for me was when someone externally to the company wanted to know how they could get on the distribution list. So it was
Oh
forwarded
wow.
on, and then the light bulb went off, and I was like, "Why do I do this just internally if
When,
it's
when
not
was this?
internally sensitive data?" This was circa 2010, maybe.
So that is a long time before newsletters are as what we know them as now, right?
Yeah. So Must Reads has been going formally, as in like externally, since 2015, really. And
Oh
I could dive
blimey.
into all the different formats and that. Yeah. So 2015, it was on Medium when it first came sort of out and became popular. And I used to just to to post it on there, and the format's changed and the substance has changed. But I knew when it was on going on to Medium from Dropbox paper, it had to be polished on Medium, whereas on Dropbox paper, people would log on and just see me updating it all the time. So it's
Yeah.
like real time, and then I'd tweet it out, and when tweets weren't when you weren't throttled on external links, and you'd see like 100+ people go on it, and I was amazed. So it continued, and I moved it to Medium, and then I moved it from Google Docs as well. That I had it on at some point. I moved to Substack, and then over to Beehive more recently.
It's quite the journey.
And that's just one of the newsletters. I've got the other side, which is Leaders Letters,
It's a bit more
which is the
niche, isn't it, that
leadership
one?
newsletter. Yeah, yeah.
So on must reads then, so you mentioned then about creation versus curation. I think it's obviously worth saying to the audience, for anyone who doesn't know you, that, and again, jump in if I'm wrong, but I mean, creation is a very time consuming process for a newsletter, whereas curation, whilst it's not a piece of cake, it's a lot quicker, right? And must reads is an add on to your, it's not the only thing you're doing, right? You're running your own business and consulting and what have you. So it's an addition. Is that how much of putting out must reads is to support that? I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk about that later in the monetization section, but I guess I was trying to get a bit of an understanding about the creation versus curation for anyone who's listening. Why you decided on that? Was it purely a time thing?
Yeah, so something I realised was there's a lot of people creating blogs.
Yeah,
There's a lot of people creating YouTube and podcasts and audio. But what people weren't doing as much back then, and sort of even to this day, they're not curating, so they're not handpicking really interesting articles or podcasts or YouTubes that people should really pay attention to.
yeah,
And so basically, if I quick pitch is Must Reads is the weekly newsletter informing you of the important themes impacting the future in under 5 minutes. So it's basically trying to give you the lowdown in 5 minutes every week, and it's
in
delivered to you every
in what
Friday morning.
sector?
So it's broad, so it's deliberately broad.
Okay,
So it can help anyone from like a CEO of a business to a co-founder of a business to, like a product lead or a product manager, and it could go all the way to someone who's just really interested in like blockchain or something, and it will just say why it's an interesting topic or why it's something bigger than a trend. So a
yeah,
trend can come and go within like an hour or 12 hours, whereas a theme is something that's going to last for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years. And I
yeah,
try and concentrate and explain why it's a theme and why it's important. It's going to impact the future. But must reads takes between 7 and 10 hours a week to create because I have to consume all the information, then to add my analysis and commentary, and then obviously schedule it out. So it seems like it would take an hour to most people, but it takes hours to consume it, condense it down, and then make it shareable within a format that people. It won't take them hours to sit there at the weekend or on Friday mornings to
no.
do. But I do, great bits of feedback I've had is they wish they had the whole day to consume the information. So I know that that's an important side of what Must Reads does for other people. Whereas for me, it's just condensing what I've learned in under five, in something digestible in 5 minutes for people to enjoy.
Do you know,
Hopefully,
I'd never really thought about it from the creation perspective, as in the sense of whatever makes it into the final edit. There's probably about, I don't know, it's probably about 10% of the content you consume to get there, and actually then, yeah, I mean, it must take ages to, or just stuff. Just, I mean, we'll probably talk about the ideation and the brainstorming. I guess maybe from a curation perspective, is a little bit different, maybe, but is it a case of you see something and you go, right, that's it, I like that, that's going in, or you stick it in a folder, or is it a case of you go hunting for things, or a bit of both?
if I was, I'll break down my process if it. I think it'll be helpful to people. It might seem
Okay.
overkill, but I do like daily checks of what I call my stack is.
Yeah.
So I've got so basically I have Twitter feeds and lists that have been curated for years. So I've got
Right.
lists for all different types, and they're typically private. I then have a curated LinkedIn. So FYI, be really ruthless. I've got around, I think it's 8,000 connections on there, but just unfollow people when obviously they share stuff or they're overly engaged on it.
Yeah.
Then I have up to 50 different newsletters that I'm signed up for, and some of those are daily, so that's a lot of emails to consume and go through. As I said, because I'm self-taught, I have to consume a lot of information to take it in, to understand it, to have an output that's kind of useful to other people.
Yeah.
Then I still use RSS, so I've used Feedly, so I've still got a load of sites that I take their RSS feed and pump into that, and I check that every few days. And then some apps that I use. So I use Yahoo Finance app, which is a bit niche, but it's really underrated for quality
Yeah.
because they have to be quite sensitive and direct around the information because a lot of it's financial, so
Yeah.
they have to be quite accurate. I'm testing out Artifact, which is a app that the Instagram co-founders have released recently. I think I'm on like day 36 streak, which means I use it every day
Oh,
basically.
you shared with me, didn't you, the podcast of the when he's talking about that? I listened to that the other day.
And it's smart and it's good and it's AI driven. So the more inputs you give it, the better the output is, the better the recommendations are. So
Yeah.
I could probably now do it all based on the recommendations on Artifact, but because I've still got my stack, it's still important because otherwise you have to pump in all of your news outlets.
Yeah.
And then, LinkedIn news is really good for discussion. So there might be, I often share someone's LinkedIn update or like a thread that someone's done on LinkedIn because actually that's where you get the true insights and people
Yeah.
talk out. And then there's a site called BizTalk, which is really good for company news and corporate news. But then the secret sources, I've got a lot of people like yourself who send me stuff on WhatsApp, iMessage, DMs, and my girlfriend's notorious for sending me numerous links and TikToks, and she said this is for must reads, or you'll love this, or have you seen this about Tim Cook, etc. So that will fit really well for leaders letters. So I'm really good that I've got this really good sort of pipeline of information and shares and links to consume. But podcasts are my thing. So I love podcasts. I listen to hours and hours of it. I call it super ear. So I listen to way over 10 hours of podcasts a week. So I
Do you
love
speed
taking in
up?
podcasts and sharing it. Yeah, I'm a 1.25 person. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
more recently. Yeah,
Yeah, I've never been a speed up. And then I was one of my own. Weirdly, it was I had a guest recently who wanted some edits done, and I'd already listened to it twice. I was like, oh my god! And it was a particularly long one as well. It was like nearly 2 hours. And it was the first time I've ever listened to it. I listened to it at 1.4, and it's amazing how different it sounds, like
yeah.
two cartoon characters. But actually, once you get past that, can consume it kind of quite well.
A tip that I like to give people is if you prefer two sets of inputs, so visual and audio, like if you like
Yeah.
YouTube over podcasts and they have the vodcast up, put it at 1.25 because it takes out all the weird nuance silences and
Right.
um you can concentrate far more on the audio as opposed to the visual input. And although that sounds counterproductive, humans are much better with one input than two. So I find actually that even if they show something on screen, you can actually you can digest it
Okay.
far more quickly, and it almost makes a little bit more sense because I use Pocket Casts as a podcast app, and it takes out all the silences. So unless you're listening to something like a true crime podcast, it's much better, and you get to the information far quicker.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Pocket Cast does it do that automatically, or have you got a
Yeah, you can
setting for
set.
that?
Yeah, you can change the settings, so you can just go in and turn up or turn down according to what your preference is.
You might have just inadvertently answered a strange question that we couldn't work out. My editor and me a little while ago. She was sending me podcasts that she'd done, and I listened to them in Pocket Casts. Strangely, as a file, because it's one of the few podcast apps where you can download files and listen to them locally. I couldn't work out why they kept changing in length.
Mm,
And I was like, "What have you changed?" She's like, "Nothing." But maybe that's why. Maybe it's to do with the silences being cut out.
I imagine so.
Mystery.
Yeah.
Just solved the mystery. I mean, we've kind of just skipped the question. You talk about your system and process. Is there anything you want to cover from the brainstorming ideation process? I guess you kind of covered it a bit, and I guess from a curation perspective, it maybe it's a little bit different. But was there anything when I sent the questions through that you immediately thought of that was worth sharing from that angle?
Yeah, so the tools I think are important. So I use Gitpocket or Pocket, which is gitpocket.com, and
Yeah,
I save all the articles in there and read it in there because it often takes away a lot of the ads and spacing,
yeah,
and then I can filter through. So, for instance, I use Beehive, which is a relatively new tool. Tyler and the team are really good at shipping product releases, so I actually curate and create within Beehive. So unlike other newsletters I do it directly in there as opposed to on Google Docs. But basically, I'm a dyslexic, so I have dyslexia, and a lot of the time I need it for spelling check and grammatical errors, and it
yeah,
helps me with it. So these extensions are really important to me. So I've completely optimized my stack. Um, so going through it and the process is really different to how I would go through. So sometimes, because I sometimes even start on a Friday, so the newsletters go out at 7:30 every Friday morning,
yeah,
and I can instantly start the next week's newsletter because there might be something that's come through in the morning or overnight that has to go in next week's. But what that does do is it things go on the chopping room floor. So I try and only stick to like 10 links a week.
yeah,
But we go into the reason why it's 10 and click through rate and clicks to open, etc. But yeah, because I do it every day for the week. Sometimes things get removed or an update's happened, which makes the story none and void.
yeah.
So it's an interesting process. Some people think I'm mad for doing it the way I do, but it's the process I've settled with, and it's the most optimum I can I feel like it's getting the optimal out of the newsletter.
I don't doubt
Whereas
that. Go on.
leaders letter is very different. So I write a long list of topics and try and connect it with culture, company culture strategy, or the directions the companies are going. So I have a list of
Yeah,
problems, the problem areas, and then things that some people are never taught. I try and help people understand. So strategy is one that people always think everyone's got a strategy. They don't. It should be one company strategy. Then it should be like the departmental plans, team plans, and then the tactics. So
yeah,
try and break that down for people, for instance. And I can write a newsletter in minutes. Sometimes it comes to me and I'll knock it together really quickly and then schedule, and it's almost done. Whereas some of those can actually take 4 hours. But for instance, I write a lot of it in Apple Notes because when I'm on walking my dog or on a walk, something will come to me and I make notes. Then I shift it to
yeah.
Google Docs. Then I put it into WordPress, and then I put it into Substack and schedule and send. So I'm usually a couple of weeks before, it's a couple of weeks ahead, but it gives you the two sides of the different newsletters that I have and the two
Well, that's what I
processes
was saying,
that I
right?
go through.
The creation and the curation is two totally different beasts.
100%.
And for those, we didn't really talk about leaders' letters much. Do you want to give a quick elevator pitch on what that is?
Yeah, so it's your weekly newsletter for leadership. So it's helping you to improve your leadership one action at a time. So it's
Okay.
weekly, so it gets delivered every Friday morning. So it should be hopefully an interesting thing in your inbox at 7:30 on Monday mornings.
Do you find? I mean, they're very different, right? One's a bit more niche. One's a bit more, um, or a lot broader, I guess. Does your thoughts about them because of that vary, change?
I'd say they both inform each other. So,
Okay.
for instance, there's a video I'm putting in this week's, which is on quantum computing, and that's in must reads
Okay.
because of the movement that we're all going towards within AI and having to have break things more quickly. So we're going to need to have more powerful computers.
Right.
Interestingly, that then plays into leaders' letters because what a lot of companies have done is they've dived into AI or Chat GPT or Open AI. They've dived into it and they forced it early, as opposed
Yeah.
to really understanding the use case, why they're applicable. So I'm writing at the moment. I'm writing a newsletter which is I've been trying to complete for say 10 weeks, and it's
Okay.
around AI and leadership. And because it's changing, it's a rapidly changing space. This quantum computing has really helped me understand the concepts behind it and how leadership is connected to it and how leaders are making bad decisions or potentially bad decisions based on misunderstanding what they need to do or a fear of missing out. So
Yeah.
the two do go hand in hand. So I can curate on one side and then be inspired and create on the other.
Yeah.
But if I had to, if I was doing one, then I probably wouldn't be as informed if I didn't do must reads and just did leaders letters.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about your goals from your newsletters. I'm kind of curious what they are.
For me, it's very different to what other people's would potentially be.
Okay.
So leaders letters, because it's part of my company called Focus, it's ultimately lead gen. So
Yeah.
I'm helping people. So I'm a coach and advisor and consultant that helps in company strategy, um, company culture, and in other connecting areas. So when I advise companies like startups, for instance, it's very often about lead gen. So people come to me with a problem, or they say, "Hey, we've got this company culture issue. Can you come in and help us?" And
Yeah.
Leaders that has done that, and that's ultimately the top goal for me. And whereas other people and newsletters, and if they're in a content team, would probably just look for sponsorship or traffic or
Yeah.
additional reads, for me, it's lead gen. Whereas on must reads, the goals for me are very much getting in front of the brands that I want to work with.
Okay.
So I want to connect with, and that will connect well with my audience. So that that's some version of monetization, and I think that's one thing that we'll probably love to dive into. But for me, in the way that it works is, I can have sponsors that can sponsor placement, or I can sponsor, certain bespoke deals.
Yeah.
Or for me, like monetization can also mean that there could be a new platform that could help me gain more tips. So I get paid from the newsletter. People tip me, and Chris, thankfully, you've tipped me before. Um, and but it's a micro payment for me for people to say thank you, whereas
Yeah.
sponsorship isn't scalable. And as you know, I've advised and consult. It's not as easy to concentrate on the growth side of it and get in front of millions of people. For me, the way that my goal is to get people to give me tips to say thanks for helping them, and in and around Christmas is the most popular time for me to get people
I see.
buy using buy me a coffee.
That's interesting. I didn't know you were going to say that because I did buy you a coffee the other week, and the reason I did that was because I thought to myself, I was just sitting there reading it one Friday morning, and the day before we'd been having a conversation, me and my wife, about magazines and stuff, about how I used to like, I can't remember, we bought my daughter a magazine, it's like £7, something crazy. And it went on this whole conversation about magazines. And then I was like you, I subscribe to a lot of newsletters. And I was trying to find a balance between why I feel like I can read a newsletter for free, but I would go and pay whatever for a magazine.
Mm.
And I sort of had this guilt thing about, oh, I want to buy Danny a coffee. But I wasn't expecting you to say that. I thought you were going to say something like, I know it's on the end of my newsletter, but actually not many people do it. And it's just a sort of a thing.
It,
But I wonder
I
why we're
don't.
not doing that more for our creators.
Two sides. One is that I don't put it in every newsletter, so I don't want. I know that everyone gets fatigue, and
Yeah,
having worked and run a crowdfunding platform, there's nothing worse than what I call ask fatigue. You're asked to
yeah,
do so many different things. You're asked to be given, to be, sponsored, essentially, be asked to be supported numerous times a day, like not only from the creators that you support and you read or you watch their YouTube, by different artists or etc. that are trying to give music away for free. You don't pay for it, but you buy their merch, etc.
mm,
But you're asked to give money all the time, and I know that there's a finite amount of times you can do that. Whereas for me, it's a case of I do it, and I share a lot of my expertise a lot. So I
yeah,
pull it in periodically, I could probably go through and count the times I've done it. So it's probably only been probably 20 out of 259 must reads that I've done that. However, I think that we've got so used to free content, consuming so much content, we're overloaded with content. And
Yeah.
actually, one of the points of why I'm a creator or curator of newsletters is because I think it's an honor to land in someone's inbox that would want to spend 5 minutes on my content. And I think some creators think that way and others don't. But I
Mm.
think it's an honor that someone would see me and look out and read something I've put together and spent hours on, which most YouTubers do because it takes hours to edit.
Yeah.
But the whole way of tipping is kind of gone. It started to line up into probably where it should have done, and I think it's lent back on because of the macroeconomic situation we're in. But I do think the younger audience with skins and NFTs, etc., are used to tipping. Whereas I think the older generation aren't because you're not a named brand or you're not a magazine or you're
Yeah.
used to having, you know, every newspaper and every magazine for free for so long. Now people are wondering, hang on a minute, why do I have to pay for content now? It's on the internet, it should be free.
Well, you say that, but newspapers you do pay for, and then the newspapers pay the journalists, and it's a similar concept, right? I just wonder where we go. I mean, what's your views on the sort of the paid subscription models and stuff in newsletters?
Personally, I think so. There are a load of different ways, right, to monetize your audience and monetize the
Yeah.
people that invest their time into you and connect to you. So for me, it makes perfect sense. You have to choose as a creator. You have to choose whether creating content is a free activity, it's a freemium activity, it's a premium activity, or more, right?
Yeah.
So you have to work out how you're going to monetize your audience in a way. So what most creators go through is, and having studied a lot, and I've got a load of tips if anyone wants them, and I'll probably share them towards the end. Is I think what a lot of creators have to go through is working out how to monetize and which one makes most sense and
Yeah.
how they can do it quickly. So, I've worked on the pricing side in a few businesses and do consultancy on pricing. And funny enough, it's the hardest projects that you ever work on because you have to work out what you're worth.
Yeah.
And creators, if they say, for instance, it's £10 a month, that only works at scale. Whereas if only one of 100 will pay for it, that's only say £10 or $10.
Yeah.
So to make it worth your time or make it worth it, if it isn't a passion project, is really tough. And
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for you should pay for every piece of content, but are really important pieces of content you should probably pay for, and that it's really difficult if you started out for free is to then monetize it, or if you've monetized it and then open something up for free. So the best model is the Ben Thompson strategy model, which has now been replicated on Substack and Beehive and a load of the platforms. But creators having to work out what they're worth, and if they're not bundled with something else, they then compete against Netflix. They compete against any of the streaming services for value.
That's what I was just going to say. That should the onus be on the consumers of the content to actually put their hands in their pockets a bit more? Like, for example, I was just going to say the same thing you just said. Like, for instance, I will pay my Netflix bill every month. I will pay my uh, my Disney bill. I will pay my uh, whatever other subscription I've
Sky
got, Amazon
Sports,
Prime,
BT Sports, yeah.
Sky Sports, Virgin Media. And as much as it annoys me paying those bills, I do it without a second thought. Yet, likewise, I mean, I got YouTube Premium, I guess, for consuming that. But this is what I was trying to say right earlier, like when I bought you that coffee, because I was like, I will consume your newsletter, and I have done for a long time, and I've never paid for it. And I know that your expectation is not of that, but I'm wondering if the onus should be more on the consumers to say, oh, hold on a second, am I getting value out of this? Am I enjoying it? Why shouldn't I put a couple of quid in every now and again?
I think that there's the people who are conscious of it, so that they understand that they're creating that the hours it takes to create something. And then there are people that receive in the format they receive it in. So whether it's YouTube, it's typically for free. On newsletters, it's typically for free. So I
Yeah.
think unless they've signed up and known that there's a price to be paid or like a value exchange, then most people think it's like a free service.
Yeah.
So there's a whole school of thought about how you could optimize and pricing around it. And one of the schools of thought at the moment is bundling. So creators going in under a bundle, and then you paying slightly less than you would if they're all individual. But the value of that bundle is only as good as the value exchange, not the price that you paid at the value you get from it. And if you're not bundled with things that are either super relevant or completely tailored to your interests, it's very difficult for you to say that's worth that money.
Do you think it kind of seems to me, and I don't know, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it's 2023 and it still seems like monetization of content is almost a bit of a dirty word. It's almost like people do expect it to be free, or
Ev-
or they'll moan about the amount of adverts that are put on it, or sponsorship, or I mean, you see it all the time, like on podcasts, and they're like, "Oh, sellout." I see it on social media often. It's like, well, hold on a second, like people have got to get paid, but it seems like it's strange that as the creator economy has grown so much, and at the point where it is now, is like the fact that monetization is still almost a bit of a taboo subject.
yeah, this so the way that I see it is if you're people have been given the opportunity to use products, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok,
Yeah,
etc., for free, but they don't realize they're the product. So they don't
yeah,
realize everything that you do is enhancing their product. And also they can charge based on you, so they could charge at targeting you. So I think there's still a bit of a misunderstanding of that value exchange
yeah,
because they are flooded with content and content that's relevant to you. So people are gobsmacked that TikTok get them within, I think their objective is 5 videos or 7 probably. Um, I think it's 5, but
yeah,
it's the interest graph. So it's the entertainment graph. So as soon as they can get what you're entertained by, they've hooked you in, and then they can then sell ads on top. I think the problem with creators and curators, especially creators that are publishing on YouTube and it's coming through email, they're used to that being free. So
mm,
the value exchange there is, well, it's coming on, it's on a free platform. Why should I be paying for it? So I think that the tipping model, tip jar model, is an interesting one because it can work for a lot of people. Other
yeah,
people monetize by merch, but you have to have a big audience to really sell. And then you have the other side of it, which is ads plus, which is they serve you ads within their newsletter, and
yeah,
then to remove them, you pay to basically remove the ads or be ad targeted. And then there's that full subscriptions, which are monthly or whatever. And everyone talks around micropayments, but no one's ever got that to work like at
well,
scale, especially media. So moving forward, I think that it's people have undervalued creators, but there is so many for you to have that brand resonance, the brand affinity. I've been doing it for 10 years, really. For people to, I still find it amazing that so many people open it every week.
mm,
But I know that I'm conscious that they're doing it for free, but there has been leads, there has been, I've done consultancy based on something I've said in one newsletter. So something, I'll give you an example for the listeners and the viewers on YouTube. Is there's an article that I wrote. It's called Superfans, and it's basically saying that creators have this power over a set number of people,
yeah,
and these superfans will pay for everything. So they'll pay for them to go on a trip, or they'd pay for them to create more content, or to start a YouTube channel, or go onto Patreon, etc. But
yeah,
there's these super fans become this like machine, and what they do is they promote your content. They'll listen to your content or your music or your videos or your newsletters, and they'll share it with everyone, and they'll find a tribe, and it
yeah,
gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that article has got me 2 or 3 different advisory clients or consultancy clients, But I put that out because of something I saw a trend happening, like a theme happening on the internet. But I
Yeah,
was fully aware that I don't have a big enough audience for any other monetization. But I might have, say, 100 people a week that read everything that I write. Might not click
yeah.
on the links that I share, but they love my analysis. But they're like, I'm not saying I've got super fans, but they're the super fans, and they're
No,
the
but you
ones that
have
would
to a
support me
certain
if I needed to.
degree in that script. You have got a super fan, right? I mean, whether it's as many as a rock group is not the same thing, but it's about growing that super fan base. Was I think I've got it somewhere, but if not, make sure you give me the link to that, and I'll share it in the show notes so anyone can have a read. I think I've
Very
read it,
well.
and it is interesting. We kind of segue nicely onto a bit about audience engagement, and you mentioned it a little bit before about people sharing ideas with you, but I guess audience engagement. I put this question in because I'm kind of curious how people react to it and whether or not they do it. Like for instance, you'll see a lot about there's certain creators out there who do not read the comments because
Mm.
of trolls or because of negativity or whatever it is. I just wonder what your view was. I guess it's not um like, do you do it? Do you engage with your audience?
For me, there's one of the reasons I do it is to get feedback and engagement. So I
Okay,
actively encourage it. Um, so I have like a bias for better. So like I always want to get it better. So it's
right.
not always doing more, but I want to optimize or improve what I'm doing. So whether that's the writing, the content selection, or the creation. So I've had feedback on WhatsApp, Telegram, email, which is often the most personal because they hit reply and they can copy something that they love or don't love. And I've had it through, Twitter, LinkedIn, DMs on Instagram. I've had someone um, go across on both accounts just to try and say how much they loved a bit of analysis that I did, and one of them around how I explained strategy got shared because in my analytics I could see it being shared on Teams, and they
Okay.
shared it, and they work for a really big company, so it got shared on Teams in like one of the main groups. So there was like this flood of traffic that came in, and then I got feedback off a wider audience that would never have seen my newsletter otherwise, and that's all because I engaged with them and I want to have that feedback. Whereas my girlfriend, she used to do YouTube, and she's more of a like an entrepreneur really now. But
Yeah.
she used to get the other side of it, which is the trolling side, which people would would say something around your appearance, or they'd pick up on an accent that you had. And I've had, I have had trolls. So I've had the odd ones on Twitter DMs, and I've had people do the passive aggressive, rating my newsletter as a 1, not a 5, and stuff like that. And you realize actually in the more the creator space, it's kind of part and parcel. But yeah, if I'm not at that scale where I get a lot of negative feedback, but I have had it, and I've have received some when I was speaking at a conference about it. So they're both sides, and there for all of the negative, there are many positives as well. But if I think once you hit a certain scale, say north of 10,000 subscribers, you probably don't want to dive into the comments or look at
Which is a shame,
your
really, right?
other
Because I
box.
think
Yeah,
we both know the benefit of, I guess, positive audience engagement, positive feedback. I don't mean positive as in blowing smoke up your backside, but I mean like positive as in constructive criticism, maybe. Um, but it's strange, isn't it? It's a shame that once you get to that certain level, it's not manageable anymore.
yeah.
Why did why
It
why did they rate your newsletter a 1 out of 10?
so my
That's made me
newsletter
laugh.
my newsletter's grown like tremendously in the last sort of month. The must reads newsletter,
Okay,
and it's been recommended by other newsletters. So people come in, and then it's the first
is that
interaction they've had with the
organically?
newsletter. Yeah, I don't know whether it's organically or because of how Beehive are taking on their recommendation engine.
But as
Um,
opposed to you reaching out and doing like sponsorship or
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
placements
it's
or anything.
organic.
Okay.
It's like product driven. So, but if it's the first interaction with the newsletter, They don't
Yeah.
have a way to not do it unless you put ratings on it. But this person has been on a newsletter for a long time, so I don't know whether they hate read it every week, which people do hate view YouTube channels or hate listen to podcasts. But
What?
yeah,
What? What's that?
yeah, there's hate viewing, right? So there might be someone that you really dislike, but you watch every week. So like their vlogs, or you might watch. Um, so this happens a lot with Joe Rogan. There's a lot of people that hate listen or hate watch Joe Rogan
Okay.
because of the topics he comes up with. So because it's fast and intellectual most of the time, some people just dislike him but are obsessed with the content and what he's going to say. So for everyone, like Jordan Peterson or the Paul brothers, or call me daddy or call her daddy on Spotify, and all of those people will hate listen or hate watch just to try and like cancel them. So they'll try and pick something they've
I had to
said
try and
and do
find
it
something to.
exactly. But this also happens now, right? Is you subscribe to something, and it's so easy now to make a mistake, and that's something one of the tips I was going to give is you're going to make a mistake, you're going to say
Yeah.
something or spell something wrong, and someone's going to take it offensively. So it's up to you really as a creator to take that on board and take the good with the bad, or use it as whether you want to use it or delete it or use it as fuel for the next newsletter or video that you create.
What? So, what's in all honesty, what was your reaction when that person gave you a 1 out of 10? Did you laugh it off, or were you fuming?
Funny enough, because it's 2 click, there's enough friction for them to have clicked the wrong one. So I was like, oh, I deliberately put 5 stars at the top because I know how it works.
Yeah.
So you get more 5 stars. But because it was 2 clicks to do it, they obviously meant it was 1 star. So the first thought was, hey, I don't mind confrontation, as in I don't mind trying to get better feedback. So the system, I knew who did it. But for me, it was more anonymous. So I know that they wouldn't have wanted me to reach out and say, hey, you didn't love my content. What was up?
Oh, you know who it is,
Yeah, yeah, just because the way the systems, the tools work for
and
you.
is it someone you know?
It's someone who I've known of and worked in a similar industry for 2 decades. So I know we know of each other pretty well.
Oh,
Which
funny.
which probably 3 years ago I would have taken that as a really big knock,
Yeah.
and I would have been like, oh, "What is it?" And I would have had to rethink everything. Whereas today, Must Read's been going for such a long time that actually I'm going to have to take it the rough with the smooth.
Yeah.
Whereas on leaders letters, when I've got people from Amazon, Meta, the World Bank, etc., that are on there, the feedback's almost more constructive, or it feels like it should be more constructive because it is
Yeah.
highbrow and niche.
Oh, fair enough. It's funny. I mean, like, we talked about monetization and content a minute ago, and it's kind of the same thing comes around with trolling, right? You've got this weird section of society that thinks that content should be free, and not only should it be free, but you can say whatever the hell you want
Mm.
anonymously with no kind of recourse, or it's kind of strange, like where how because content creation is such a big industry these days, but there's not many industries where you get away with those two things. It's funny. 1 out of 10. Oh, shouldn't laugh really. Let's move on to the next question about analysis. How much analysis do you do on your newsletters? What's worked? What's not worked? Do you review content? Is there learnings you get out of it?
So must reads more specifically, I know how many clicks they get, but also I know that if I put a story at number one, the first one,
Yeah,
it's anchoring bias, and more people click on it. So
yeah,
often I'll put my own newsletter from leaders letters up there because I know it get most clicks. So I do game it a little bit. And as I used to run a growth department, if I'm not doing it, I'm doing myself a disjustice.
yeah,
Um, but I'm positively obsessed about the performance of it. So if it drops or the open rate tanks, I either know that it's an email delivery problem, or I know I've put something that a lot of people disagree with, or the subject line's bad, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but also that I know not to obsess over it, as in not badly obsess over it, because if I was doing it and paying for growth,
Yeah.
it's hard and expensive. And even the serious media companies are spending a lot of money on it at the moment, and especially on paid performance. So I do look at numbers, open rates, click throughs, and then I look at sub rates, so subscription rates. So more recently, it's gone, it's rocket ship. It's gone up to the right, almost on both newsletters, but more specifically on must reads. And what's really interesting is I haven't really done much to push it, other than I've tried to brand it a little bit more, and that's the activity I've tried to do.
How much of that goes down to, you mentioned it earlier, and I know we've spoken about this offline. How much of that is based upon you changing platform to Beehive?
So I think there's two sides of it. There's the delivery aspect. I was having problems with Substack, and for anyone who's unfamiliar with newsletters, basically you're only as good as the platform you send it via.
Yeah.
The IP address, if it's warm, so basically means if loads of other people are on it and it's getting opened a lot, and all the signals that your audience are given to those platforms, which basically means if people are opening it and reading it, it's great. If they're not, the likelihood is you'll be filtered into other or promotion or social on Gmail or other on Outlook.
Yeah.
And then Yahoo, for instance, they'll overly aggressive in putting you into spam or into junk if a lower proportion of people open it. So you have to
Yeah.
be really careful. So that was one side of moving. The other side was Substack are great, as in they're trying to be more than a newsletter platform, which is great. But then they're tailoring to the 1%, so the top
Yeah.
1% as opposed to the rest of us. And despite being on Substack since they launched, it wasn't really being a product that was improving for everyone. It was just improving for the 1%. So that's why I decided to move. And also, the analytics were pretty stagnant on it, and I wasn't really growing. But as soon as I moved to Beehive, it grew. The delivery was much better.
Okay.
And again, that's just based on how the platform's built and how great Beehive have been in understanding the 99% problem as opposed to the 1%,
And what?
creator problem.
Because it's a paid for platform, isn't it? Or they have a freebie as
So
well.
I'm a freebie to give them some brand prop. I'm a freebie, but it you can do it for free, £49 or £69 a month, and it scales. So the more audience you have, the different scale it becomes. So the price increases, and then
Yeah.
depending on the price, depends on the features you get.
Okay. So you're happy with Beehive?
Yeah, so like, I could give some tips for people that want to listen. So if you're really thinking of becoming a newsletter um, creator or curator, it's
Yeah.
really focusing on brand, like make the newsletter stand out, because basically you're just a program on live TV. You're just another program, so you have to give people a reason to tune in. So
Yeah.
whether that's like the branding of your newsletter, that you have a voice, that you're opinionated, and things that you do try or you don't want people to try out, be something more, be like consistent. The amount of people that tell me that consistency is the reason why they stick with me is like they know it's coming every Friday morning. So the way I explain
Yeah.
it to people is be that live sporting event that you actually tune in for on TV, or that like live TV show that you don't want to watch 8 hours later. It's the live performance, and just be basically be confident and I really understand your community. So if you've got an audience and you want to turn it into something more, be really confident in who you are and what you're about and stick to
Yeah.
it. You can experiment, but the further away that you become, the harder it is for them to stick with you. And you'll find your 1 or 10, 100 or 1,000 fans or super fans that devour everything you put together. So they're the sort of the top tips I'd give on that sort of side.
I think that consistency one is killer. Like it's amazing how many, and I am as guilty of this as anyone. Like I look back at some of the projects. I think we might have talked about this before. Like some of the projects I started in the past, and where they would be now, had I have just like carried on. But you're right. You think that you're not. We all think we're special, and we all think that we're not going to be like falling for this consistency and regularity, but we do, and it almost becomes like a muscle memory. I know that there's two emails I get on a Friday morning at 7:30, and you're one of them. And shout out to the Upshot, who's the other one. But my mind now knows that they're coming every Friday, and I've even got to the point where I don't know, kids, I'm up early and whatever, and I'll be looking at my phone waiting for it to come in, which is insane, really, when you think about it. But I do.
When I studied, right, and part of the stuff that I do outside of the newsletters and some of the failed podcasts that I've had is some of the stuff that I've done is really over analyze how creators work and why they deliver it. And there's some amazing media companies that overthink it and have gone to like lengths of testing. So I run a marketing department that had 25 million people in the database, and sending an email, and you had to be meticulous about when you sent it and the language you use, etc. So the morning brew, the skim, the hustle, these are all like daily emails, or 4 to 5 times a week emails,
Mm,
and they want to be the first thing that you think of when you're on the toilet in the morning. It's like
yeah,
their section of the time that they want. And how the Chinese apps are built is all based on time. So the reason why I deliver at 7:30 is most people that are going to work will be on the commute probably, or
yeah,
parents have that time window where they can do the stuff with the kids and then have their own slot of time.
yeah,
And the reason why I say it's in 5 minutes is because most people, the max time that they have doing something without being interrupted is at around 5 minutes. So mine's
So
engineered to a point.
did you test different times then? Have you looked at that?
So I've done midnight, Friday straight away, like the first thing, midnight, because I've got US, Australia, and the UK are my primary areas.
Yeah,
So I did midnight, and that bumped up in performance. But then the UK, it was getting lost in the UK, which is primarily my audience. I've
yeah.
tested 6 and 6:30 a.m., 7:30, and then 10. And 7:30 is probably there's a bit of bias in there, but 7:30 is the best performing.
Can you not segment based upon location?
You can and you can't. Certain tools will do it for free, others won't.
Okay,
Most of the newsletter ones won't do it without you paying. Or
okay,
you can do you if you're clever, you can set up AB or ABC tests and send it
yeah,
at
yeah,
certain times. But for me, if it is as good as I'd hoped it to be, then people will read it regardless of where they are.
yeah. Fair enough. Is there anything you struggle with or find tough when it comes to newsletter production?
Yeah, for me, if you obsess around the audience and it doesn't grow, that's something that I think everyone gets hurt by. I struggled to grow it for years, to be honest. There's like 2020 to 2022 was really tough to grow it, and
Right.
obviously there was a lot of things going on, but that was really tough. And although I don't over obsess around subscriptions, I'd rather have it for 100 than 100,000. But I want people to look forward to the content. So, that I want people to want to, read it or print it off as a PDF and go away and read the analysis.
Yeah.
Finding stories can be quite tricky that people will want because it's so broad, it isn't super niche. Then, because I try and break through what's a theme, which is, 1 to 5 years impact, as opposed to a trend that's like just overnight or this week. It's kind of difficult to find something that will apply to 100, 1,000, 10,000, a million people. So trying to find that can be quite difficult. And also in 2020 to 2022, I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, to be honest, because I found it a
Right.
slog because everything had a negative undertone. And because the amount of content I consume to put it together, if everything's negative, it can also influence my own mood, which I didn't want. So they're like three sides, and then the other side of it's more like mechanicals. So it's like the algorithmic filtering, which really annoys me, which means that
The
emails.
email inbox stuff.
So yeah, so Outlook, Yahoo, Google Mail, they'll put you into the other inboxes really quickly, and that kills your reads and then your deliverability. So however good your content is, you're being filtered out. So it's the same on on social networks. It's just email filtering. People don't talk around as much.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Danny, because obviously there's a lot of stuff going on about platform risk, right? Everyone's talking about um, Twitter throttling content, same with LinkedIn, and anyone who works in marketing will have heard some derivation of this thing. Get an email list because you own it. But you're right. No one talks about that platform risk in email and about the spam folder and about the promo folders and the rest of it. But it's a real thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and imagine the way I explain it to people is say you had 100 people because it's easier for maths.
Yeah.
If there were 100 people on it, at any one time, really good open rates are like 30% to 50%. Hardly anyone ever gets above that, but most
Okay.
frequently you're lower than 30%. But there's like that window between 30 and 50% that you might get. So I'm on 43% open rate, which is good. So people choose 43% of the time to open it, basically.
Yeah.
But say it's 100 people, you're only ever really going to get it delivered to, say, 90 to 99% of them. And then 30% of those will open it. So although you own it, you're still being throttled in a way because of people proactively choosing to open it, or
Yeah.
it went into another inbox that week, which then means that they don't have a chance to open it, or they didn't
Yeah.
look at it, or they just think you didn't send it. So it works against you. But I'd always say to people, if you've got a podcast or you're doing YouTube, try and get those email addresses and then send email, because when I had podcasts, that I knew that the open rate was massive. Like
Yeah.
it's really good, and it really helped the podcast grow. And then the best hack I ever had was add it to LinkedIn as a new job, and then I had loads more people subscribe to it, and then therefore more listeners, right? But
Yeah.
what people seem to forget is that email is really disposable for a lot of people, especially on their own, like Gmail or Yahoo. So you
Mm.
fight against so many other things. YouTube's far more specific, so you can turn on the notifications, but most people don't. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say that if I was ever going to give anyone a recommendation, if you're going to do a newsletter or create your own content, always have something that you feel like you could reach out to them individually to invite them.
Yeah. You mentioned something a minute ago about open rates, and I wondered what your view was on how you go about improving that, testing that, working out what is good.
You can, if you were to do it at scale, so as a company, you change the type of delivery, the IP address, you do subject line A/B tests, which means you send a percentage to one, a percentage to the other, and if you have an emoji in it, it used to lift your open rates up. Basically,
Yeah.
it would appear, it'd stand out in your inbox. But if you wanted to increase that now, it's about people opening it more, having better signals to those platforms to getting people to open it more often. So some people do a resend, which I don't personally don't recommend because it can impact you and can cost you money. But
Is that where you? Cause I get that every now and again from certain people. Where it's like, oh, you didn't open this email, so I'm sending it again.
yeah, or
Presumably,
oh,
that's
something might have
something.
happened. Yeah,
Yeah, but you don't think that's a good tactic?
if you're at a scale, then and you don't mind spending money, then that's a way that you can do it.
Yeah.
I've never had success doing it from a personal perspective. From my newsletters, obviously professionally it's different, but um, personally, I've never seen the benefit. I've never benefited from resending. If anything, it impacts it because people might have actively decided not to open, and they're going to ignore you a second time.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're going to
It's
drop
like a
out.
self fulfilling prophecy almost, isn't it?
Yeah. So to give
So
you another example, so what a lot of other people do is they'll send a daily email and then they'll send a recap on Fridays or Saturdays, and it's a
yeah,
way to keep that engagement. But that's, if you're bigger, you can do that. If you're smaller, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But you know, I if I'll dive into it really quickly. Like the professional creators, the people that are doing it for a living,
yeah,
they there's like 7 things that they do. So the first thing is have strong content but have personality. So that's what people buy into, is the personality inside of the content, right? And
yeah,
then they do it via a newsletter or YouTube or other. But then they add a service. So they add like a podcast or a YouTube channel or shorts to try and
yeah,
capture your attention far more. Then they attempt to build what community, which is based on chat apps generally, so Slack, Telegram, Discord, WhatsApp. They build into it, and it can be invite only, or it can be like those people that join.
Yeah.
Then it's like a paid component, so they go from paid and then they add value really quickly. So whether that's access or exclusive content, they release it, and then it's growth, right? So it's collaborate to expand or cross promote to expand,
Yeah.
and then if they're big enough, they do in person events. So a lot of this is it sounds overkill, but it might inspire people to either do more or be smarter about what they do, and that's based on the top percentage of creators that do it and move from doing it for passion into getting paid.
It's funny. So that's basically the playbook, right? For doing work newsletter. There was one I subscribe to. I get every day. It's a daily one, and I'm assuming from researching people like them, they are doing exactly everything you just said.
Yeah, I'll share a list of all the really good ones that I recommend to anyone, whether they're niche or a little bit broader. And they're really good newsletters for people to sign up for, especially if you're interested in the craft. They're
Yeah.
really good for people to sort of sign up for or read anyway.
Okay. Have you ever thought about packing it in?
The the
The
newsletters,
writing of newsletters. Yeah.
I thought about turning one of them into a TikTok and just creating it as a TikTok channel, because you could probably talk it through and then you'd probably build a bigger viewership.
Which
But
one?
I think that's super disposable. Must reads is the one
Okay.
that's most applicable. But I don't.
Does it have?
I
Does it have to be one or the other?
No, but there's only a certain amount of hours you could do it. Plus, I'm a perfectionist with my own stuff. Although uh, I'm not sure I could spend hours in CapCut for a 3 minute video that might get 100 views and then one might blow up for the wrong reason. I don't think I'm
Yeah.
prepared for TikTok comments.
They'll be rating your TikToks 1 out of 10. That
Yeah,
might hurt
exactly.
more. If you could shadow one newsletter creator for the day, who would it be and why?
Ben Thompson from Stratechery.
I knew you were going to
Um,
say that.
yeah, yeah. Why for the audience, because Chris knows, is he has his own media network now, really. So it's a strategy based newsletter, and he's now offering 4 to 5 podcasts bundled in. And I've listened to so many of his podcasts where he talks around his company, how he does it, why he does it. But I still think by shadowing someone as and spending a lot of time with them, you start being able to think like them or thinking differently
Mm,
to them. So I think it's important to be able to do both, is to dive in or dive out of it. And I think Ben Thompson, because it is really niche, and every tech leader pays for subscription, they don't get it for free. I think it'd be really interesting because he was one of the original people to go out on his own, but also integrate audio, which a lot of newsletter writers don't do, and he's done really well.
he's doing it to a really different level, isn't he? Like you
Mm.
shared a lot of his stuff with me in the past, and I consider myself quite um, aware of a lot of content and creators and the rest of it. But even I wasn't overly familiar with him. But he's taken it like the stuff he's doing is just on a different level to 99.9% of other people, right?
He The difference is he was fortunate in the time he released, but also very meticulous in how he's created his audience, how he's marketed to different audiences, and how people have shared his content, because it's either
Yeah,
really reflected in what they want or what they think, or is really broken down in really complicated areas that other
yeah,
people have really struggled with. And he's a one person band basically based internationally, and he still writes for the US audience. So it just shows you the level of detail that some people go into, but also how you can really niche down and be applicable to an audience that used to be really difficult to break into.
yeah. I'll put in the show notes maybe that there's a couple of things you shared with me in the past that he's done. I'll put down a worth a listen to people. But yeah, he's an interesting guy. If someone listens to this and they want to come and pick your brains and they want to email you or contact you on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, and because they want to start their own newsletter, what would you tell them?
8 things. So there's
8
8 things to do.
things.
Yeah.
All right,
So
get me chair.
it's create your own lane, don't be the same, but be different. So, go at it yourself, find your own path or your own avenue. Go for the format that works for you. Don't
Is that just going
don't
back
do
to
it.
point one? Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt you and be a bad host. Is that easier said than done?
People copy, but copying is difficult, right? So you can copy my format, but being consistent over it and finding something that's interesting enough to a different audience is going to be difficult. So
Yeah,
find something that's relevant for you, or you can have an opinion on, as opposed to rather than just have an opinion for an opinion's sake, actually add value to the audience.
yeah,
So if I one of my goals is to get someone to guest edit must reads and see how well it does for the next year, but that could go horribly wrong for me. It could go really well successfully for the newsletter. It could go horribly wrong for me because it just might have a completely different audience, a different level of connection, whereas they might be bored of my own stuff, right? But I think you should always be different. You can always be inspired, but choose your own path. Is how I
okay,
would explain it to people. Go for the format that works for you. Writing isn't for everyone, and it isn't easy. I think it's probably the hardest form of creating. And just ask any book writer that. It's really difficult.
yeah,
So if it's TikTok and short video, do it, or YouTube Shorts, or if it's longer form, do it, or if you want to do audio notes, which I've always thought about doing, do it. If it's a podcast, try and do it. It's really hard. Get past that magic 8 number, and then
yeah.
you can go through it.
But then it's
Building
still
your
hard.
audience, yeah, exactly. Building your audience is 80% of the job.
Yeah,
Find the right tools to help you. The tools I use probably might not help other people, and there's a million tools out there. So find the tools for you. Making mistakes is part and parcel of what you do. So just either own it or embrace it. Find people like you can co-partner with or co-brand or partnership with. I don't do this enough, but I know that it really helps other newsletters. Don't do two newsletters a week. It isn't sustainable for most people. Um, some weeks I struggle, and that's I dedicate a lot of time for it.
What
And then
what about daily newsletters?
uh, oddly enough, I think it's probably that might be slightly easier if you were to do it every day because you
Okay,
get into a rhythm and a pattern. Whereas I think if you do two very different newsletters, it can be quite difficult to flip between the two or stick with a tone that you've decided to write with.
yeah, yeah.
And just a last tip: competition is healthy.
What do you mean by that?
So you're going to get people who compete with you, but actually use it to inspire you or to challenge you to improve, as opposed to get put off that they've got a big audience.
Who do you compete with?
Sleep and the Netflix way of doing it. No, in all honesty, I think personally I compete with every different channel, right? So I compete with your email, your WhatsApp. If
Yeah,
you wanted to watch, the latest F1 thing on Netflix, I'll compete with that because I'm stealing time away from other
yeah.
things. So I'm only a notification away from being ignored. So for me, competition is everyone, but that's my product, product person headspace.
No, no. Do you know? I think that's a theory that you talk about there that is often overlooked in a lot of things. Is actually, you break the day down into minutes or whatever. Every minute is a competition, whether it's your newsletter, whether it's, I don't know, your kid, or whether or not it's whatever it is. And it's interesting. I mean, we've both got
Mm.
marketing backgrounds, but often a lot of people talk in marketing about your competition will be brand X or brand A, but it's not actually, is it? In the content world, it's you're right. I think everyone is the competition, because you just getting to the point where I did it the other day. I do it all the time. I'll open up a thing on my phone, a browser, and then a notification will come through, and then I'll go and look at whatever it was, and then I'll come back to the Safari browser, and for the life of me, I can't remember what I was going to search
Yeah,
for all the time.
that's the funny thing around tabs as well. I know this is a broader theme, but your tabs, if you're curious, you've probably got like 50 tabs open, and you probably wouldn't remember the third tab in that one, the reason why you had it open. But that's the
I'm not.
that's the you compete against all of those, and you're competing against a text message or
Yeah.
a WhatsApp from one of your friends, or group chats, or people complaining on another channel.
Yeah. It's kind of mad, isn't it? Do you think, like, just finishing up on that, if someone came up to you question, do you think there's still room in the market for someone to start a successful newsletter today?
Yeah, I think there's always opportunity for people, and I think you're only one share away from blowing up, really, still in
Yeah.
the way that the internet works today. So I think there definitely is, and I think there's an outlet for everyone. It's just everyone's a content creator. That like they're creating content, whether that's at work, an email, or on WhatsApp, or what have you. So they're already doing it. So I've got a framework that I tell people when they ask me, and it's EIE, which is entertainment, inspiration, education. So if you can fit into those and know which one you fit into, I
Yeah.
think you've got an opportunity. And then whether that applies to a newsletter, podcast, short video, presentations, which is something that I love creating, or if it's your preference, something like OnlyFans, if you've got a niche,
Yeah.
that works on there as well. So, and then three types of content in my mind is timely. So the world we live in is right now. There's
Yeah.
time sensitive content. There's timeless posts, which are like updates that anyone can go back years down, years later and still find really useful. And
Yeah.
I just think you have to decide what you're most applicable to and build the associating audience, and then you can be successful. So it doesn't have to be a newsletter; it could be a podcast, YouTube. YouTube's hard now, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Interesting
the sort
stuff.
of way that I look at it.
Okay. If we spoke again in 12 months and you considered that it had been a successful year for must reads and or leaders letters, what would have happened?
I think I'd have found a long-term sponsor for Must Reads, so a brand that I'd really want to sort of highlight, and showcase on there every week. I'd
Yeah.
have 1 to 2 consultancy or advisory gigs. So that's something that I think is really important. Like I'm a coach, so like I love coaching. It's like what I get all my energy from. So it'd be one
Yeah.
to two coaching gigs. Leaders letters would be grow by like 25%. But it's surprisingly hard when you've got a newsletter for leaders. They don't want to share it because they have to admit that they're signed up for one, and B, that they might actually not, they'll be copying someone else's ideas or rolling
I
out on
didn't
their
think you were going to say
frameworks.
that. I thought you were going to say they didn't want to give your tips away to other leaders.
Well, there's that, but I think it's admitting that they're on there and they're getting help from a newsletter, which have had some feedback on.
Have
Um,
you really? That really
yeah,
surprises me you say that.
it's my dirty little secret. Is one that I get a lot. Is it's my guilty pleasures, stuff like that. I've had feedback on leaders letters is something that how they think and how they interact with it, or the way that they consider it. So they wouldn't. Some people will share certain frameworks because it's a framework. Other people
Yeah.
will share the buzzword bingo because it's fun and interesting. Other people, when it's really specific and gets down to like company culture or strategy, other people just don't want to share that content. I get that, but it's really interesting putting yourself in the readers or listeners or your viewers' perspective.
I must really mess up with your growth hat on because
It
that
does,
that
yeah,
sort of changes the game, right?
exactly.
Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up there, Danny. But I think I've got no doubt that Must Read is going to grow. Well, I got no doubt they're both going to grow. They're very good newsletters, and hence me wanting to get you on here today. Where can, if anyone wants to A, come and say hi, or B, sign up to either or both of your newsletters, where should I be linking to in the show notes?
So I'm Danny Denhard on every platform. There's only two of us in the world, so I'm easy to find or easy to troll. And then if you want to, there's a few places. DannyDenhard.com is my website. And then mustreads.co.uk for the mustreads newsletter, and then leadersletters.com will take you straight to the archive.
Excellent. Danny, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much for having me.